career and encourage yourself and eventually contribute back and move the needle, shift the needle forward. And that's what we do at the IBM conference. And with all this, some of you may be too young to remember that in 2001, Eric Waymire is a blind mountaineer, and he summited Mount Everest as a blind person, totally blind person. And his climb was sponsored by the National Federation of the Blind. He was on a team of 19 climbers, and the Federation wanted to dust off the image of blindness by putting a man on top of the world. Now, when I say putting, not like the sighted people carried him up there and set him down, said, all right, you're up here. No. He was a fully contributing member of the team, had to carry his own stuff, had to do the climb, put his life at risk. And there's a book called To Touch the Top of the World. If you're looking for an inspirational story, I highly recommend you read it. And there were one or two movie renditions produced from the climb, and you will just see things and hear things that you, wow. Eric is quite the daredevil. You've heard of the Marvel Daredevil story show? Yeah. Well, Eric is the closest thing to the real thing I can say. So with that, I've got my acknowledgments. I mentioned ACS Division of Professional Relations before. I want to thank the organizers of this symposium for reaching out to Prof. And I get an invitation to be here with you all this morning. And most importantly, to you for your attention. And I want to thank you very much. I guess we're ready for the question. And I'm going to tell you, if you do this, I can't see you, you're going to get a cramp. So how I like to do this, since I like to know who I'm talking to, you can say your name, and then we'll acknowledge you, and then you can ask your question. Who'd like to go first?
This is about the scam about ATA health awareness symposium.
Oh Lord.
They were been thinking about the scientific about. I want to describe about Dr. Tom H. He was at the CTA at Pennsylvania State University.
What's his question? Not talking about.
Dr. Tom.
You're right about something. He's gonna learn the hard way.
Dr. Tom.
I don't think he'll be able to answer your question. All right.
Hi, my name is Orlando Rojas, and I have a question about it, and which is, how did you ever to achieve what your career if you have, I'm sorry, but the blindness that you have ever, what are the challenges you have?
The biggest challenge I found was the misconceptions and educating hiring committees and department faculty as to how I performed my research. And how I did it was, in graduate school, I hired and trained undergraduate science majors to be my lab technicians. And they performed the experiments that I devised and complied with all the calculations that I did, and they helped me consult and read literature that only appeared in print back then. It's much more electronic now, but at that time it was still a lot of print. I trained my lab technicians to also make the content accessible, so I taught them how to make raised line drawings. If I needed tables produced in Braille, they were trained how to do that, Braille documents. And then I had to figure out how to present lectures. I started with using hard copy Braille with, I'm going to date myself, transparencies. And I had to put staples in the corner, top right corner of each slides, so it was one staple was slide 1, 2 staples was slide 2, and so on. So that told me the order. But then, of course, screen reader technology and refreshable braille devices and PowerPoint and Microsoft products, it makes it pretty seamless. And I also, since I didn't lose my eyesight until I was 7, I did learn how to write. So I can write in cursive, which I'm told people don't do that anymore, but I do. And I can write equations and calculations. And I learned my students when I was a chemistry professor at Illinois State University, if my writing wasn't legible, they complained, Dr. Espy can't read that. I quickly erase it and make it bigger. Okay. And then when I taught lab, because I taught chem lab as well, I would have a seating chart where we have 24 students in this lab section, and there were 4 students per table. We had 16 lab tables. I numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, if you're familiar with how Braille works, there are a maximum of 6 dots in Braille. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they're numbered. So that's how I did my seating chart. Table 1 is like Braille dot 1, table 2 is Braille dot 2. And then I wrote on a piece of Braille paper in a folder that I carried around the class the names of who's at table 1, who's at table 2, and table 3, and so on. So let's just say table 1 had Sarah, Mike, Susie, and John. And I just walk around the room, over to table 1, and I'd say, Sarah, what part of the experiment are you working on currently? And they would proceed to describe it to me. Okay. And then I said, Mike, do you agree with what Sarah's doing? Oh, I don't know. I think she should do louder. We need to do this differently because we're all working on it as a team. And then I say, John, what do you think? And then Sarah says, oh, John's not here today. All right, well then, Susie, what would you do? And so they rat on each other too. Okay, so these are communication skills. And then there's the blindness skills of navigating independently around the room. I tell you, I get around airports and travel all over the world very independently. And yes, so that definitely helps in the laboratory context. And I'll tell another story briefly. One time, one of my students, who shall remain nameless, started an unauthorized fire in the lab. This was up in Illinois. That was a cold February morning, and the fire alarm went off in the building. The lab got full of smoke, and I had to evacuate the lab. And normally, as a blind student, the faculty member was like, who is going to get carried out of the lab in case of an emergency? This is an inclusion moment for me, because now it was my students I had to get out of the lab. And of course, they all did exit the lab and went outside to our meeting point where we were supposed to meet under laboratory safety protocols. And I quickly walked around the room with my kid. I had my one hand in front of me like this, because if I was going to encounter any flame, I wanted to hit my hand first. And then I just made a verbal announcement, is everyone out of the lab? And then no one said anything, and I closed the door and exited the building. So when I